Welcome to this edition of Vantage Point. We are most pleased to have the United Church of Christ churches in one community, the community of Suffield, present with us for this conversation today about interdependence. One of the things that's a reality of our conference is we have, in some communities, more than one United Church of Christ congregation in the community. And sometimes those congregations see themselves as competitors. It doesn't have to be so. There are ways that cooperative ministries can be exercised and carried out, and people can learn from each other, people who share the values of the United Church of Christ. So I am really pleased today to have with us two guests from the United Church of Christ in Suffield, the Reverend Bridget Fidler, who is from the First Church of Christ Congregational in Suffield, and the Reverend Eric Fistler, who is the pastor of the West Suffield Congregational Church. Welcome today.
Thank you.
So we're glad you're here. I'd like to hear you give voice to the cooperation that exists among your two congregations, kind of how this cooperative spirit began with the two congregations, and just tell us a little bit about that. So Bridget.
Well, it's funny because Eric and I were talking about it, and we can't figure out how it started. But there is a sense of competition between the churches that has been there since they split. And the fact is that West Suffield is a little smaller, and so they always feel threatened by First Church. But we didn't see it that way. Yeah. We started working together in an interfaith group that has been in Suffield for years, and we just naturally started working together. We saw that West Suffield had ministries and attributes that First Church didn't have. First Church has some attributes, a little bit more money, and different kind of space that both churches could benefit from, and it just seemed to make sense that we would work together.
Yeah, absolutely. It was very organic the way that the entire collaboration came about, and it started more with kind of the personal relationship, I would say, between the two of us, seeing our ministries as not being competing. And that is a big change, because I think generally ministry at times, when you introduce yourself, you say, well, I'm the pastor of the West Suffield Congregational Church. Oh, how many people do you have at your church? I mean, that's the, and that's not necessarily that. We're all doing the same ministry. We're all called to the same ministry by Jesus Christ, and it's all for that, the glory of Christ, that we do it. And so therefore, why wouldn't we? If we're not working together, we're working against the kingdom. And I think we both saw that, both theologically as well as practically. I mean, the reality is that while West Suffield is smaller and things like that, all the churches are in a state of needing to work together, and especially when we're like 3 miles apart, it just seemed natural.
Wonderful, yeah.
Yeah, and also because ministry is hard work, and to do ministry by yourself doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And Eric is a lot of fun to work with. He and I complement one another, and so it just seems like a natural thing to split the work.
Yes.
So we've come up with various different things. We were just remembering that last year we did a retreat for deacons, and we were going to, I thought, well, why would I do that by myself? They've got deacons. And even though the churches may see their deacon role as different, we were able to do a really wonderful collaborative retreat together, and the congregations, the deacons, the leaders got to know one another, and I think they really appreciated it.
That's great. So what have you learned by being in this relationship with each other? What kinds of things have been fruits that have been born out of this relationship?
I think one of the biggest things, especially for my congregation, I mean, there is definitely a sense of mutuality. And one is whenever the congregation works together, I mean, it's very easy to, you know, we always joke about, well, that's the way we've always done it. But often if you're in a church, and we have folks who have been members of, you know, our church for 60 years, and same at First Church, if that's the only church you know, you don't know who's doing it 2 miles down the road. How are they doing church leadership? How are they doing mission? How are they doing Christian education? And so to have that opportunity to collaborate and say, well, I mean, and that we're in the same town. We're dealing with the same population. I mean, a little bit different, but roughly the same people, sometimes members of the same extended family. And so to have that opportunity to work together has, I think, been a real learning piece for me, as well as the really, and Bridget, you pointed this out, dismantling the lone wolf idea of, well, you know, we need to, solo pastors, go out there, strike it and on your own and do that. The idea that we do complement each other very well. We have very different styles, but complementary styles, and so therefore we're not in competition with one another at all. And making it, I think a lot of it is humor and fun, and I think there's also in relying a great deal on grace.
Yes.
I know that one of the programs that we did was a joint youth program, which we put a lot of time and energy, and it looked beautiful on paper, and it didn't really pan out. Well, that doesn't mean that the collaboration doesn't work. That's one ministry. So we say, all right, well, what are we going to do next together?
I want to circle back to that, but Bridget, do you want to give any examples of what you're learning from this partnership?
I think its lack of ego is huge. If we can model that, then the churches can model that. So, for example, I had a husband and wife coming to our first church, and they were splitting up. And so I suggested that that the wife go to West Suffield, because I thought Eric would be a great fit. And I think that sense of that we are here to do a job together, to help people to feel connected to the Word, to feel inspired by worship. I knew that she would enjoy Eric's preaching, and she's really enjoyed her time there.
Right. Let's go back to the youth ministry piece. It sounds like that was an experiment. And an experiment that didn't work as well as you might have envisioned or imagined that. And I'm really encouraging our congregations to think about trying experiments and recognizing that not every experiment comes out as a success. There's a sign on my door as I walk in my office every morning that says, "Make new mistakes." So would you share with us kind of what you learned from the youth ministry cooperative experience that you won't make that mistake again? Are there some things that you would share with our viewers about what you learned from experimenting and making a mistake?
Well, I think the greatest learning was taking the chance. I mean, I think that was the biggest piece. I mean, part of it is that First Church had a lot of youth, more youth than we had at West Suffield. We had a lot more volunteers at West Suffield. But at the same time, we were also, I think both of us were basically, we were still trying to do youth ministry the way it had been done the last 20 years. I mean, that was the mistake, and that was something that we both entered into. There was a collaboration. It was a new way of working in an old model. And so it didn't work. All right, so what First Church has really been exploring, and what we're excited to begin to once again collaborate with, is, so how do we collaborate in a new model? It's not that the collaboration was a problem. I mean, that seemed to work out great. It was that youth ministry, the nature of youth ministry has changed. And I think realizing and saying and I wouldn't call it a mistake at all, or I would just say it was a great learning experience to say, okay, so why didn't this work?
Right.
Well, it didn't work because youth ministry's changed. Well, it's changed in West Suffield as much as it's changed in downtown Suffield, and so what are we going to do to help serve the youth?
That's great. So as you think about the future of this partnership, which you obviously are committed to, and I would observe that this is a competency of leadership for the future of our church that's so necessary, this spirit of cooperation, this spirit of mutual ministries. What's your hope for the future?
We joke about a Suffield Christian Center because we actually would love to get the Baptists across the street involved as well.
Yes,
I mean,
of course.
we just really wonder about the practical aspects of having 3 churches within a very small area, and if that makes any sense.
It makes perfect sense.
And so we are working with our Baptist colleague across the street more and more. We're going to be doing Lenten worship together. We've been doing Bible studies together, and just that, it's like 3 for the price of 1.
Yeah.
I mean, because we get to share that. They get to hear different voices. That they get a female voice, a male voice. It's just different perspective, different passions. Our Baptist colleague across the street is very passionate about eco-justice and climate change, and he brings that piece, so it's a really nice collaborative effort. But I don't know, I think what I see is wanting to continue to break down the walls between First Church and West Suffield.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's great.
That's really...
Yeah, I would say that's really it. I mean, there's a future vision that says, okay, where do we, that would be great to have a Suffield Worship Center. I mean, to see, when you have a church, when you have a community that's as small as Suffield is, relatively, to say, why are we having 3 churches that are spending an exorbitant amount of money on capital campaigns? and to say, is this furthering the kingdom of God or hindering the kingdom of God? But I would say in the short term, I mean, the reality is that, you know, that churches move slowly. And so the question is we had collaborated with the Baptists on a study on science and religion in the fall. And the moment that study ended, we said, okay, what are we doing next? And so we said, we're going to do a Bible. And so we hadn't even started our next Bible study, and we were planning Lenten worship together. And so and now we're looking at how can we expand. We collaborate a lot on mission, both visiting Cathedral in the Night, a mission up in Northampton, Massachusetts, but also with our Crossroads Food Pantry at the West Suffield Church, and to see what more can we do to collaborate, because we are all trying to serve the greater community. And there are certain gifts that some of the congregations have that others, but we're all called to the same ministry of Jesus Christ. And so I think in the short term, that's where we see, and there's a little bit of excitement to see where will God lead us in the next year.
That is just wonderful. It is so great to hear about the cooperative spirit. And again, I think it's because of you as leaders that this ministry is possible, that the way that you cooperate with each other is a model for our full United Church of Christ. So I'm grateful to you for your ministries. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
So that ends this edition of Vantage Point. We're grateful that you've joined us in this episode. And if you have ideas for episodes, you can email us at webmaster@ctucc.org. God's blessings and peace be with you.